Cole Darden heard her before he saw her, not her voice. Her feet, the hard slap of bare soles against dry creek stone, the kind of sound a person makes when they have stopped caring about what the ground costs them and started caring only about what stopping will cost them more. He had been riding the east fence line since sunup, checking posts, not expecting a thing except heat and silence, and then that sound came up out of the gully below the ridge and his gelding's ears went forward, and Cole's hand went to the rifle before his mind had finished deciding why. He pulled the horse up on the lip of the ridge and looked down. A woman was running through the dry creek bed below. Dark-haired, lean in the way hunger makes a person lean rather than the way health does, wearing a dress that had been washed so many times the color had given up entirely. She was holding a boy by the wrist, 8 years old, maybe 9, his legs working double time to keep up with hers, and she was not running the way a woman runs from an animal. She was running the way a woman runs from men. There is a difference, and any person who has spent enough time in open country knows it. An animal you can stop. Men you cannot always stop. Men you can only try to outrun and pray the ground favors you. Cole looked past her down the creek bed, 3 riders, coming hard, still 200 yards back but eating the distance. He did not think about it longer than that. He kicked the gelding off the ridge, down the slope at an angle that made the horse grunt and scramble, and he came out into the creek bed 40 feet ahead of the woman, and he turned the horse sideways across the path and he raised one hand, open, palm out. She stopped. She had to. There was nowhere left to go. Her chest was heaving. The boy pressed himself against her hip and looked up at Cole the way children look at unknown men, when they have already learned that unknown men are a thing to measure carefully before deciding anything about them. The woman's eyes were dark and direct, and they did not beg. They assessed. Even now, even breathing like this, chest splitting open with the effort of it, she looked at him the way a person looks at an obstacle and tries to calculate the best way around it. Cole respected that even before he knew why. "Ma'am," he said, "Cole Darden. I run the Darden spread 1/4 mile north of this creek. You want to tell me what's behind you before it gets here?" She opened her mouth. Then the 3 riders came around the bend in the creek bed and she closed it again. The rider in front was a man named Heck Prout. Cole knew him by sight, not by choice. Prout worked enforcement for Vernon Stroud, which was a way of saying he did the things Vernon Stroud wanted done, but did not want his name attached to. He was a big man, raw-faced, with small eyes that moved fast and a mouth that didn't move much at all. The 2 men behind him Cole did not know, but they had the look of men hired for the same purpose. Prout pulled up 10 yards short. He looked at Cole. He looked at the woman. He looked at the boy. "Step off, Darden," Prout said. "This don't concern you." "Creek runs through my land," Cole said. "That makes it concern me." "Woman's a thief. Got property belonging to Mr. Stroud." Cole looked at the woman. She had not flinched at the word. She had gone very still instead, the way a person goes still when they have heard a thing said about them so many times that the sound of it no longer surprises them, only the fact that it is still being said. "What property?" Cole said. Prout pointed at the boy. The boy looked at Prout, and his hand tightened on his mother's dress, and he did not look away. Cole took his time before he spoke again. "That's a child, Prout. That's a ward of the Stroud estate. Stroud's got papers." "Papers," Cole said, and the way he said it was not a question and not quite a statement. "Legal custody, signed and witnessed." Woman grabbed the boy off the property and ran. Prout's hand rested on the butt of his pistol, easy, comfortable, the way a man rests his hand when he wants you to notice he is not drawing, but also wants you to know that drawing is a thing he is capable of without much hesitation. "You got no standing here, Darden. Move aside and let us do our job." Cole looked at the woman again. "Ma'am, he says you took that boy off Stroud's property." "I took my son," she said. Her voice was steady, lower than he expected, steadier than it had any right to be given what her lungs were doing. "I took my son off the property where we have lived for 2 years doing work that has not been paid honest, and I am taking him somewhere a man cannot look at a piece of paper and tell me that the child I carried and birthed and raised belongs to him." "She's a debtor," Prout said. "The boy stays as security until the debt's settled." Cole did not look at Prout. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Nora Calloway." "Mrs. Calloway. Is there somewhere you are trying to get to? She looked at him. Really looked at him, the full measuring look, and he let her look because she had earned the right to look at any man any way she chose to after the morning she'd clearly had. My mother-in-law, she said, Ida Calloway. She's got a place 4 miles east of here. She's been waiting for us. Darden. Prute's voice had changed. The easy part was gone. I am telling you once more. I am not listening once more, Cole said pleasantly. He clicked the gelding and moved it so that his body was between the woman and Prute. Mrs. Calloway, can you walk 4 miles? She looked at his back. I ran 3. Then you can walk 4. Go on ahead. Keep to the creek till it bends north, then cut east across the open pasture. You'll see the Calloway fence line from the rise. Darden, you are making a mistake that will cost you. Made expensive mistakes before. Cole rested his rifle across the pommel of his saddle and looked at Prute. This one feels worth it. Before we go any further into Nora Calloway's story, before we follow her through that pasture and down to Ida's door and into the fight that was waiting for all of them on the other side of it, I need you to do something for me. If this story has got you leaning forward, if you are already feeling what Nora was feeling in that creek bed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Ring that bell so you don't miss a single story we tell on this channel. And drop a comment below, tell me the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's get back to Nora. She walked the 4 miles. Caleb walked beside her, his hand in hers, and he did not ask questions, which told her more about what the last 2 years had done to him than anything else could have. A boy of 8 should ask questions. A boy of 8 should want to know where they were going, and why that man on the horse had helped them, and whether they were going to be all right. Caleb walked and was quiet and watched the ground ahead of them, and that silence was the thing that made Nora's throat close up tighter than any fear had managed to. She had not planned it the way it happened. The plan, such as it was, had been simpler. 2 weeks ago she had written a letter to the county recorder's office in Millhaven, requesting documentation of the original labor agreement between herself and Vernon Stroud, the one she had signed 14 months after her husband Thomas was thrown from a horse and killed, when she had nothing left and 2 mouths depending on what nothing could be stretched into. She had not received a response. She had gone to Stroud's foreman, a man named Arbuckle, and asked when she might expect her quarterly wages to be calculated, and Arbuckle had laughed in the particular way of a man who is not embarrassed to be seen laughing at something that is not funny. She had understood then. She had gone back to the small cabin Stroud had provided, and she had sat on the edge of the bed, and she had looked at her hands for a long time. Outside the window Caleb was throwing a stick for a dog that wasn't their dog. His shoulder blades moved under his shirt like small wings. He had his father's way of throwing, elbow high, follow-through that meant it. She had made a decision sitting there. She had gone to Ida. Ida Calloway was 71 years old and walked with a cane since the winter of '82, and she had a mind like a surveyor's instrument, precise, level, and not subject to adjustment based on what anyone else wanted measured. She was Thomas's mother, and she had never said a word about Nora's choices after Thomas died because Ida understood that a woman in desperate circumstances does not need commentary. She needs assistance or she needs silence, and if you cannot provide the first, you owe her the second. Nora had sat at Ida's kitchen table and told her everything. The wages, the books, the quarterly statement Stroud's man delivered that always showed her earning less than what she owed for the cabin, and the food and the firewood that arrived already accounted against her before she had asked for it. The numbers that moved in one direction no matter how many hours she put into Stroud's laundry and Stroud's mending and Stroud's vegetable rows and Stroud's floors. Ida had listened without interrupting. Then she had said, "Show me the statements." Nora had brought them next time. All 14 months of them, folded into the lining of her second dress where she kept documents because she had learned that lesson early. Ida had spread them on the table and put on her spectacles and gone through every line and every number while Nora sat across from her and watched her face. Ida's face did not change much. It had learned not to over 71 years. But her jaw set tighter as she read, and by the time she reached the final statement her mouth had gone thin in a way that Nora recognized from the one time she had seen Ida disagree publicly with the Reverend Marsh, about something he had said from the pulpit, and the Reverend Marsh had not been wrong about anything from the pulpit since. He's been marking up the provisions 30% above what he charges his own hands, Ida said. And he has been crediting your labor at 2/3 the rate he promised in the original agreement, which I have a copy of because Thomas kept copies of everything his father told him to, and his father told him to keep copies of everything, and Thomas listened to his father. Nora had gone very still. You have a copy of the original agreement, the box under the floorboard beside the stove, where I keep everything I don't want found easily. Ida had taken her spectacles off and looked at Nora over them. By my calculation, Stroud owes you $412 in unpaid wages, possibly more if we can establish what the fair market rate for your labor should have been rather than the rate he wrote into the agreement when you had no leverage to negotiate. You are owed money, Nora. That is not a debtor's situation. That is a creditor's situation that has been deliberately misrepresented to you by a man who understood that you were frightened and alone and unlikely to have access to anyone who could read a ledger and tell you what it actually said. Nora had put her face in her hands, not for long. She did not have the luxury of long. What do we do with it? She said. Ida had folded her hands on the table. There is a circuit judge, name of Arthur Beecham. He comes through Garnet County the first week of every other month. He is not a man who belongs to Vernon Stroud. She paused. Most men in this county belong to Vernon Stroud in one way or another. Beecham does not. He is a particular man. He is a man who does not like what Stroud does, but he is also a man who requires evidence before he will move against a person of Stroud's standing. Evidence presented properly. Evidence that can be examined and verified. She touched the statements on the table. This is evidence. The original agreement in that box is evidence. What we need is time to get it to him. That had been 2 weeks ago. Yesterday morning, Arbuckle had come to the cabin door with 2 men Nora had not seen before, and a piece of paper he called a custody order. He had read it aloud in the tone of a man who enjoys reading things aloud to people who cannot stop him. It said that Caleb Thomas Calloway, minor child, was hereby designated a ward of the Stroud estate until such time as the outstanding debt of his guardian, one Nora Calloway, was satisfied in full. It had a judge's signature on it. The judge's name was Prentice Howell. Nora knew Judge Howell's name. Everyone in Garnet County knew Judge Howell's name. They knew it the way you know the name of a weather condition that only ever comes from one direction. She had looked at Arbuckle and she had looked at the paper, and she had made the second decision in 2 weeks. She had sent Caleb out the back window with his shoes in his hand and told him to run for the creek and wait for her behind the big cottonwood. She had grabbed the oilskin envelope she had prepared 3 days ago and pressed it under her arm inside her dress. Then she had gone out the front door past Arbuckle like she was going to the well, and she had walked until the cabin was out of sight, and then she had run. Ida's house sat at the end of a rutted track behind a stand of post oak that had been there longer than anyone in the county could remember. It was a small house, stone and cedar, built by Ida's husband Emmett 40 years ago in the manner of a man who built things he intended to outlast himself. The garden was still kept, the porch was still swept, and a lamp was lit in the east window, which meant Ida was in the kitchen, which meant Ida was working, because Ida was always either working or sleeping, and could not be made to do the one when she intended to do the other. She opened the door before Nora knocked. Ida Calloway at 71 was a small woman with white hair pinned flat and eyes the color of creek water after rain, not blue exactly, not gray exactly, something that shifted depending on what she was thinking, which was a great deal. She looked at Nora. She looked at Caleb. She looked at the state of both of them, and she did not ask questions. She opened the door wider and said, "Come in and eat something." "There's no time to. You will not think clearly on an empty stomach, and neither will that boy. Come in and eat something and then tell me what happened." Cole Darden had not followed them immediately. He had stayed in the creek bed until Prute's jaw worked itself into decision, and Prute decided that 3 against 1, with the one being a man who had the look of someone who had already done the math and liked his own odds, was not worth whatever Stroud was paying him for the afternoon. Prute pulled his horse around. He looked at Cole one long time before he did, the look of a man cataloging a debt he intends to collect later. Cole met the look without expression and watched the three of them ride back the way they'd come. Then he turned the gelding east. He told himself he was riding east because the Calloway fence line needed checking the same as any other fence line. He told himself that until he was halfway across the pasture, and then he stopped telling himself things that neither part of him believed and just rode. He had known Thomas Calloway. Not well enough. Thomas had been the kind of man other men respected without being able to say exactly why. Something in the way he stood, the way he listened, the particular quality of his attention when he gave it. Cole had seen him twice at the feed store in town, and once at the church social the year before he died, and he had thought both times that Thomas Calloway was the kind of man the county could afford more of. Thomas had been dead 3 years. Cole had seen what happened to the women men like Thomas left behind. He had seen it happen to his own mother after his father was taken by the fever when Cole was 12. The world contracted around them. The options that had existed the day before became theoretical. Other men appeared with papers and offers and help that turned out to be a different thing than what help was supposed to mean. His mother had managed because she had 2 older brothers with land of their own and the disposition to use it on her behalf. Not every woman had that. Looking at the look on Nora Calloway's face in that creek bed, the exhausted, furious, undefeated look of a woman who has run out of almost everything except the will to keep being right, Cole had known that Nora Calloway did not have that. He arrived at Ida's just as the sun was moving past noon. They were at the kitchen table. Ida had fed them both and was now sitting across from Nora with the same expression Cole imagined she wore when reviewing ledgers, and the oilskin envelope was open on the table between them. Caleb was in the corner on a stool eating cornbread with the focused attention of a child making up for meals that have not happened and not wasting time on anything else. Cole knocked. Ida opened the door and looked at him with the frank assessment of a woman who did not see the point of pretending she wasn't doing it. "Cole Darden," she said. It was not a greeting exactly, more of a notation. Calloway wanted to make sure they got here safe. They are here. Whether they are safe is a larger question. She stepped back from the door. "Come in. You'll want to hear this." He came in. Nora looked up at him from the table and something in her face shifted, not softening exactly, more like a door that had been fully closed moving open a half-inch. He had helped her in the creek bed and she had filed that away and it had changed the way she categorized him, and that half-inch was the result. He did not say anything about it. He sat down in the chair Ida pointed him to and he listened. Nora talked for 20 minutes without stopping. She talked the way someone talks when they have been carrying a thing alone, and the weight of it is changing shape as it comes out, heavier in some parts, lighter in others. Some parts she had not fully understood until she heard herself saying them. She talked about the agreement and the wages and the provisions marked up past fair price, and the quarterly statements and articles faced this morning, reading the custody order and Caleb going out the window with his shoes in his hand. When she finished, Ida put her hand flat on the oilskin envelope. "Have the original agreement," Ida said. "I have a copy of it in Thomas's hand, which is verifiable because Thomas's hand is known to the recorder's office in Millhaven. He signed a land title there in 1881. I have 14 months of Stroud's quarterly statements showing the discrepancy between what was promised and what was credited. And I have," she paused and touched the oilskin, "something else. If you are watching this and you know someone who would love a story like Nora's, someone who believes a woman's word ought to count for as much as a piece of paper with the wrong man's name on it, share this video with them right now. Don't wait. Send it before the next scene starts. This story is for everyone who has ever been told they owe more than they do. Now stay with me." "Something else," Cole said. "Before Nora came to me 2 weeks ago," Ida said, "I had my own suspicions about Stroud." Thomas had suspicions before he died. Not about Nora. Thomas died before Nora ever went to Stroud's land, but about Stroud's dealings generally. Thomas heard things from men who worked the properties adjacent to Stroud's holdings, men who had started out with agreements not unlike Nora's and had ended up with nothing and no legal recourse and a deep permanent wariness about signing anything in this county ever again. She paused. Thomas was going to bring it to Beecham. He died before he could. What did Thomas have? Cole said. Names, Ida said. 11 of them, men and women who had been through arrangements similar to Nora's. 3 of them I have been in correspondence with over the past 2 weeks. 2 of them have agreed to make statements. One of them, a widow named Cress, lives up in the north part of the county, kept her own statements. Every one of them. 14 months of statements the same as Nora's, showing the same pattern of markup and wage reduction. Ida's mouth did the thin thing again. Stroud has been running this scheme for at least 9 years. The total across all 11 cases, by my calculation, is somewhere in the range of $4,000 in wages owed to people he has told were debtors. $4,000 taken from people who could not afford to lose it and had no way to prove it was taken. Kitchen was quiet for a moment. Caleb in the corner had put his cornbread down and was looking at his grandmother the way children look at someone they love when they realize that person is larger than they understood. When does Beecham come through? Cole said. 5 days, Ida said. Cole looked at the table. 5 days was not nothing. 5 days was long enough for Stroud to do a great deal if he understood what was in this kitchen and who was holding it. Prout will come back, Nora said. She was looking at her hands on the table. Not today. He'll go back to Stroud and tell him I got shelter, and Stroud will think about it tonight, and tomorrow he'll send Prout back with more men and another paper. What kind of paper? Cole said. Whatever kind he needs. She looked up. He has Judge Howell. Howell will sign what Stroud puts in front of him. That's what the custody order was. Stroud warming up, testing whether I'd run and where I'd go. She was quiet for a moment. Now he knows where I went. Cole looked at Ida. Can you move? I am 71 years old with a bad hip, Ida said. I can move when I need to. Do you need to? Ida considered this with the same level precision she applied to ledger columns. I think, she said, that moving would be less effective than holding. If we move, we are a woman and a child and an old woman running, and Stroud's papers have jurisdiction anywhere in this county. If we hold, we are here with documentation, with witnesses who can be called, and with time if we can protect the time. She looked at Cole. You are not part of this, Mr. Darden. I was in that creek bed, Cole said. Prout will tell Stroud you interfered. Stroud will make it costly. Stroud has made things costly for people in this county long enough, Cole said. He said it quietly, without heat, and that was the most dangerous way to say a thing. I have a neighbor who lost his north pasture to a debt Stroud manufactured. I have another neighbor she's gone now, who took her children to her sister in another county because she didn't have anywhere else to go when Stroud's man came for the property she'd worked for 3 years. He paused. I have been a man who sees things he does not step into for long enough. I am done being that man today. Nora looked at him. The door moved another half-inch. Right then, Ida said, as if it had been decided by a vote and the count was 3-0. Here is what we need. What they needed was time, and they needed to protect the documents, and they needed to get word to Beecham that there was something in Garnet County requiring his attention when he arrived. Cole wrote to town that afternoon. He sent a telegraph to the circuit judge's office in Millhaven, short, factual, the kind of language that a man like Beecham would read as what it was. Evidence of sustained way, fraud, and forged legal instruments against multiple county residents. Witnesses available. Documentation held. Request earliest arrival. Then he went to see the county sheriff. The sheriff of Garnet County was a man named Walt Greer. Greer was not a bad man. He was a man who had learned to navigate in the particular weather pattern that Stroud created, which required certain accommodations to survive and certain silences to maintain, and a careful management of what he saw versus what he reported seeing. He was not corrupt in the way Howell was corrupt. He was more like a man who had convinced himself that the accommodations were temporary and the silences were practical, and that one day the weather pattern would change on its own if he was patient enough. Cole was not interested in patience. He told Greer what he had seen in the creek bed. He told Greer what was in Ida Calloway's kitchen. He told Greer about the custody order with Howell's signature, and the names on the quarterly statements and the $4,000 distributed across 11 people who had never seen it. Greer listened. He had the expression of a man listening to something he already knew but had not had to hear said out loud before and was not enjoying the experience. "Stroud will push for another warrant," Cole said. "Tomorrow or the day after. He'll want Nora Calloway's documents. He'll want the boy." "If Howell signs it, will you serve it?" Greer was quiet for a long time. "Walt," Cole said. "I hear you, Cole. I know you do. I'm asking you a plain question." Another silence. Then Greer took his hat off and turned it in his hands and said, "If Howell signs it, it looks legal." "You've seen Howell's signatures for 9 years, Cole said. "Do you need me to tell you what they look like when Stroud brings them in versus when someone else does?" Greer's jaw tightened. "That's a thing I can't prove," Cole said. "It's a thing you know. There's a difference." He put his own hat back on. "Beecham will be here in 5 days. Whatever Stroud brings you between now and then, I am asking you to find a reason to wait on it. I'm not asking you to break the law. I'm asking you to read it carefully." He stood up. "That's all." He rode back to Ida's as the sun was getting low. That night Stroud came himself. Cole had not expected that. He had expected Prout or Arbuckle or another paper or all three together. He had not expected Stroud to ride out personally in the evening light on his gray gelding with only Rawl beside him, riding quiet up the track through the post oaks like a man paying a social call. Vernon Stroud was 60 years old and looked like money that had always been money and saw no reason for that to change. He was clean in the particular way of men who can afford to be clean no matter the circumstances, and he rode straight-backed and unhurried. And when he pulled up outside Ida's door and looked at Cole standing on the porch with his rifle leaning against the rail, Stroud did not react to the rifle at all. Men who knew they had more power than the person looking at them tended not to react to the specific shape that power took. "Mr. Darden," Stroud said. "Mr. Stroud. I did not expect to find you here. I expect there are a few things about today you didn't expect," Cole said. Stroud allowed himself a slight adjustment of expression, not a smile, something that lived at the edges of where a smile might go. "I've come to speak with Nora Calloway. Doesn't want to speak with you." "I didn't ask what she wanted. I said I've come to speak with her." He looked at the door behind Cole. "Nora, I know you're there. Come out and let's settle this the way reasonable people settle things." Silence from inside. "She is a woman in my debt," Stroud said to Cole. "The boy is legally in my custody by order of Prentice Howell," Cole said, "who signs what you put in front of him, who has been signing what you put in front of him for 9 years. He picked up the rifle, not raising it, just holding it. "Mr. Stroud, I have sent word to Arthur Beecham. He'll be here in 5 days. Whatever arrangements you and Howell have made in this county, Beecham is not part of them. You know that as well as I do." Something moved in Stroud's face. It was not large. It was the kind of movement a thing makes when pressure is applied to a point the other person did not know was a point. "You have put yourself in a difficult position, Mr. Darden." "Been in difficult positions," Cole said. "They pass. This one may not. That's possible." Cole looked up at him on the horse. "You rode out here tonight yourself, Mr. Stroud. Not Prout, not Arbuckle, you. A man who sends other men to do his business comes himself when the business has gotten complicated enough to worry him." He paused. "I think the position you are describing may apply to both of us." Stroud looked at him for a long time in the fading light. Then he pulled the gray horse's head around. "Rawl," he said. Rawl, who had been sitting his horse 6 feet back and watching Cole with small, patient eyes the color of nothing in particular, turned with Stroud. "Mr. Darden," Stroud said over his shoulder, "you have until morning to reconsider." "I won't need that long," Cole said. He did not sleep. He sat in the chair by the front window with the rifle across his knees and listened to the post oaks move in the night wind and thought about the particular arithmetic of the situation. Stroud had Howell. Stroud had Prout and whatever men Prout could gather. Stroud had 9 years of practice doing what he did in this county, and a system that had been built to accommodate him. On the other side of that arithmetic were 3 women, a child and Cole, and the documents in the oilskin envelope, which Ida had moved from the kitchen table to a place Cole did not know about and did not ask about, on the theory that what he didn't know couldn't be extracted from him by any means Stroud might try. And 5 days. Nora came out of the back room somewhere past midnight. She moved quietly, which he had the sense she had learned to do the way children learn to do it in houses where noise has consequences. She sat in the chair across from him and did not say anything for a while. "You should sleep," he said. "Not sleeping. Watching." "I can watch." She looked at him. "You don't know me, Mr. Darden. I know enough. You know what you saw in a creek bed." "I know what I saw," he said. "Woman running with her boy. 3 men behind her, creek running through my land." He paused. "I know what kind of man lets that go past." "Kind that keeps his peace," she said, not cruelly. "I have been that kind for a while," he said. "It doesn't sit right anymore." She was quiet for a moment. Outside, a nighthawk called from somewhere over the pasture. "My husband used to say," she said, "that a man who looks away from a wrong thing is not a neutral party. He is a vote for the wrong thing." She paused. Thomas believed that. I think he would have been afraid to find out whether he really did until the moment came for it. And then the moment didn't come. The horse came instead. Her voice stayed level the whole way through, and that cost her something he could see in the set of her jaw. "I am grateful for what you did in that creek bed. I want to be clear about that. Whatever happens." "What happens," Cole said, "is Beecham gets here and your mother-in-law hands him what she's been putting together for 2 weeks and Stroud answers for what he's done. If Stroud moves before Beecham arrives, then we hold." She looked at him. "You sound very certain about that." "I'm certain about that," he said, and the thing was he was. He could not have explained entirely why, except that it had something to do with the look on Caleb's face when Prout pointed at him in the creek bed, and something to do with the weight of the $4,000 spread across 11 people who had worked for it and never seen it, and something to do with 7 years of looking away, and how it sat in a man's chest like a stone he'd gotten used to carrying and had stopped noticing was heavy. He had noticed today. Now if this story has you gripping your seat, if you understand what Nora was carrying and why Cole Darden is still sitting at that window at midnight, I need you to hit that like button. Not later, right now. It tells this channel's story matters and it helps us reach the next person who needs to hear it. Keep watching. Prout came at dawn, not with 2 men this time, with 5. An arbuckle behind them with a paper in his hand, which was the new warrant which had Howell's signature on it, which Cole had known was coming and had spent the night preparing for. Cole was on the porch when they came up the track. He had the rifle. Caleb was in the back room with strict instructions. Ida was at the kitchen table and had been since 5 in the morning because Ida Calloway did not require much sleep and used what time she had the way she used everything else, without waste. Nora was standing beside Cole. He had told her to stay inside. She had looked at him the way she had looked at the obstacle in the creek bed, calculating the best way around it, and then she had walked out and stood beside him, and he had not said it again. Prout pulled up at the base of the porch steps. It was better rested than yesterday, and it showed. "Got a warrant, Darden, signed by Howell. I am authorized to take custody of the minor child Caleb Calloway and to seize documents unlawfully removed from Stroud property by one Nora Calloway." "Me see it," Cole said. "You ain't got standing." "Him see it," Nora said. Arbuckle brought it forward. Cole took it and read it. It was a thorough warrant. Stroud had been busy after the ride home last night. Cole looked at the signature and looked at the date. "This was signed at 9 o'clock last night," Cole said. "That's right," Arbuckle said. "Judge Howell's office is in Millhaven," Cole said. "Millhaven is 2 hours from here. Stroud rode out to Ida Calloway's place and spoke to me and rode back and still managed to get to Millhaven and have Howell sign this and ride back home." He looked up. "That's a lot of riding for one evening." A silence. "Or Howell signed a blank warrant and Stroud filled it in," Cole said. "Which is the kind of thing a man does when he needs legal paper in a hurry and has the kind of relationship with a judge that makes that possible." Prout's eyes had gone flat. "You refusing to comply, pointing out that this warrant may have procedural problems," Cole said. "I've sent for Sheriff Greer. He should be here within the hour. He can evaluate whether this is a valid instrument before anyone takes any action under it. That seems like the reasonable approach." Prout looked at him. Then he looked at the men behind him, and the men behind him looked at the rifle, and there was a calculation happening across all of them simultaneously, and Cole was part of the calculation, and he knew it. "Darden," Prout said, "don't make this worse than it is." "I am trying," Cole said, "to make sure it doesn't get worse than it needs to be. That is different." He looked past Prout to the men behind him. "I know some of you, Harker, Ben, you've been in this county your whole lives. You know what Stroud does. You know what these arrangements look like when they get going and what they look like when they're done." He paused. "A man who earns his wage honestly doesn't need to be the instrument of someone else's fraud to keep it. Think about what you're being paid to do here." Harker, in the back, looked at his hands on his horse's reins. Ben looked at the porch. Prout said, "Enough." He pulled his horse sideways to face his men rather than Cole. "We wait for the sheriff," he said, and it came out of him like something he was biting off. Greer arrived 40 minutes later. He looked at the warrant for a long time. He turned it over. He looked at the signature. He looked at the date. He looked at Cole, and then he looked at the warrant again. "Prout," he said, "when was this drawn up?" "Last night." "You can see the date." "Can see the date," Greer said. "I can also see that Howell's signature looks like it was written in a moving vehicle." He folded the warrant. "I'm going to hold this pending verification of the signing circumstances. I'll ride to Millhaven this afternoon and speak to Howell myself." "Sheriff, Mr. Stroud will." "Mr. Stroud," Greer said, and there was something different in his voice than there had been in Cole's office yesterday, something that had settled into a different register overnight, "is welcome to discuss it with me at my office. The warrant is held." Prout's face went several directions at once. Then he turned his horse and rode back down the track, and his men went with him, and Harker, last to leave, did not look back. Greer sat his horse in front of the porch. "Walt," Cole said. "Don't thank me yet," Greer said. "He'll have another paper by tomorrow, and he'll go around me if I keep blocking him. He's got connections in Millhaven outside of Howell." He looked at Cole. "Beecham needs to get here, Cole. I know it. 4 days is a long time." "I know that too." Greer nodded once and rode down the track. The next 4 days were the kind of days that aged a person in ways that did not show on the outside. Stroud came twice more with papers. Greer held the first and found a procedural error in the second genuine enough to void it. On the third day, Prout came with a man from Millhaven who was not Howell but who had authority delegated from Howell, and Greer met them at the end of Ida's track and had a conversation Cole could not hear from the porch but could read in the shapes of the men, Greer straight and still. The Millhaven man increasingly loud. Prout watching with his hat in his hands, which was the posture of a man who had run out of moves, and was watching someone else try the last ones. Inside, Ida worked. She wrote in her careful hand, the hand that had copied columns of figures from Thomas's notes, and cross-referenced them with Nora's statements and the statements of the 2 women who had mailed their own documents to Ida's address. Because Ida had known 2 weeks ago that this was where it was going, and she had prepared for where it was going with the methodical calm of a woman who has learned that panic does not improve arithmetic. Nora helped her, and at night she sat with Caleb until he slept and then came out and sat across from Cole again, and they talked, or they didn't talk, and both were fine. He told her about his father and the fever and his mother and the 2 uncles who had meant the difference. She told him about Thomas throwing a stick for a dog in the evening light and the particular quality of his attention, and how she had understood she would marry him before he knew it himself. On the 4th day in the afternoon, Ida called them both into the kitchen. She had the documents laid out on the table, all of them. The original agreement in Thomas's hand. Nora's 14 months of statements with the discrepancies marked in red ink. The 2 letters from other women with their own statements attached. A summary in Ida's hand of the total amounts, name by name, debt by debt, fraud by fraud, going back 9 years. Everything cross-referenced. Everything dated. Everything as clean and precise and irrefutable as a surveyor's map. "When Beecham comes tomorrow," Ida said, "this is what he will see. It is complete. It is legible. It is documented in triplicate because I made 3 copies and each copy is in a different location." She looked at Nora over her spectacles. "He will not be able to say he was given confusion. He will be given clarity." Nora looked at the table for a long time. "Ida," she said. "Thank me yet," Ida said with the same inflection Greer had used, and it struck Cole that the people who understood what was actually at stake were all saying the same thing. Thomas would have. Thomas would have done exactly this, Ida said. He just ran out of time to do it himself. She took her spectacles off. "We are not going to run out of time, you hear me?" "Yes," Nora said. "It like you mean it." "I mean it," Nora said, and she did. "We are almost at the courthouse. We are almost at the moment everything Nora and Ida built comes to face the man it was built to face. But before we get there, I need you to do one thing. If you have watched this far, you believe in Nora Calloway. You believe that a woman who runs 3 miles barefoot for her child and then holds for 5 days against a man with a county in his pocket deserves to see that courthouse. Subscribe to Redwood Chronicles. Share this story. Leave a comment that says, "Hold the line," so I know you are with her. Now let's finish it. Beecham arrived the next morning. He was not what Cole had expected, which was foolish because Cole had met him once, 3 years ago, and should have remembered. Arthur Beecham was a small man, wiry, with a white beard cut close and the eyes of a man who had been reading documents in poor light for 30 years and had developed a particular intolerance for things that did not say what they claimed to say. He rode a good horse badly, which was either a character flaw or a deliberate choice, and Cole suspected the latter. He swung down at Ida's gate and Cole met him there. "Darden," Beecham said, "your telegraph was not long on specifics." "Specifics are inside," Cole said. They went inside. Beecham sat at Ida's kitchen table, and Ida placed the documents in front of him and he read them. He read them the way Cole imagined he read everything, slowly, completely, going back to check things he had read before against things he was reading now, making no sound except the occasional turn of a page. Nora sat at the far end of the table. Caleb was in the back room. Cole stood by the window, which had become his place in this house over the last 5 days. After 45 minutes, Beecham set the last page down. He looked at Ida. "Mrs. Calloway," he said. "How long did this take you to compile?" 2 weeks of current work, Ida said. 9 years of everything leading up to it." Beecham looked at the summary page. Then he looked at Nora. "Mrs. Calloway, Judge, these quarterly statements, you kept all of them." "Everyone." Address lining. "I learned early to keep documents close," she said. Beecham nodded slowly, the nod of a man confirming something he has suspected. "I am going to schedule a hearing for this afternoon. The hotel dining room serves as the county court when I am present. I am going to send word to Stroud this morning that I require his presence and his records, specifically his labor ledger for the past 9 years. He paused. "He will bring a lawyer." "Has one," Cole said. "A man from Dallas," Beecham said. "A man from Dallas will not know this county the way I know this county." He gathered the documents carefully and placed them back in the oilskin envelope. "Mrs. Calloway." "Did Ida? The original agreement, Thomas Calloway's hand, verified by the Millhaven Recorder's office," Ida said. "I wrote to them 2 weeks ago. There is a letter of verification in the envelope." Beecham looked at her for a moment. "You thought of that 2 weeks ago." "I thought of everything 2 weeks ago," Ida said. "I had time while the hip was bad." Hotel dining room held 30 people if they stood. It held more than that by the time Beecham called the hearing to order at 2 in the afternoon. Cole stood at the back. Greer stood beside him, his star on, his face arranged into the expression of a man who has decided who he is in this moment and is done deciding. Caleb sat between Nora and Ida in the front row, his back straight, his eyes forward, the posture of a boy trying to be as large as the room required. Stroud was there. His Dallas lawyer was there. Prout was in the back with his hat in his hands. Rawl was not there. Cole noticed that. A man like Rawl knew when a room had turned and stayed out of rooms that had turned. Beecham set the documents on the pine table at the front. He did not do it dramatically. He did not do anything dramatically. He simply placed them and smoothed them and looked at Stroud's lawyer and said, "Counselor, I have before me a labor agreement signed by your client and one Nora Calloway, widow, on the 14th of March, 1883. I have 14 months of quarterly statements issued by your client to Mrs. Calloway that show systematic discrepancies from the terms of that agreement. I have statements from 2 additional parties showing a substantially identical pattern. I have correspondence with the county recorder confirming the authenticity of the original agreement. I have a summary document compiled by Ida Calloway, the handwriting of which I will accept as the sworn testimony of the author pending cross-examination." He paused. "I also have a custody order signed by Judge Howell dated 2 days ago, which I will note was signed under circumstances that raise procedural questions I intend to address separately with Judge Howell at the earliest opportunity." Stroud's lawyer stood up. He was a tall man, carefully dressed, with the manner of someone who had won a great many arguments in rooms by being the best-dressed person in them. "Your Honor, my client." "Sit down, counselor," Beecham said. "I haven't asked you anything yet." Lawyer sat. Beecham looked at Stroud. "Mr. Stroud, I'm going to ask you a plain question and I want a plain answer. Do you have in your possession a labor ledger covering the period from 1877 to the present?" Stroud looked at his lawyer. The lawyer looked at Stroud. "Mr. Stroud," Beecham said, "a refusal to answer will be noted." Stroud said, the first thing he had said since sitting down, "I have a ledger." "You bring it." A pause that cost Stroud something. "No," Stroud said. "I am ordering it produced," Beecham said. "I am sending a deputy to your property to retrieve it within the hour. If it is not there, or if its contents have been altered from their present state, that fact will be noted in today's record." He looked at Stroud with the patience of a man who has learned that patience is more effective than anger and is harder to outlast. "Mr. Stroud, I have been riding circuit in this county for 11 years. In 11 years I have heard a great many things about your arrangements with the people who work your land. I have never had documentation sufficient to act on what I heard." He touched the oilskin envelope on the table. "I have it now. Because a 71-year-old woman with a bad hip sat at her kitchen table for 2 weeks and gave it to me in the clearest possible form." He paused. "I want you to understand what is happening in this room today. This is not a preliminary inquiry. This is the beginning of the accounting." Stroud's face did not move, but his hands on the table in front of him closed slowly into a shape they had not been in before. The ledger came back. Every line in Ida's summary matched every line in Stroud's own hand. The markup on provisions, the wage reductions, the pattern running 9 years, 11 people, $4,000. Beecham's decision came before the sun went down. The custody order was voided as procedurally fraudulent. The circumstances of its signing referred to a senior judicial panel for review. The debt claimed against Nora Calloway was struck as invalid under the terms of the original agreement, which Stroud had systematically violated. A civil judgment was entered against Stroud in favor of Nora Calloway in the amount of $412 in unpaid wages, plus interest. Similar judgments were approved for the 2 women whose statements Ida had included, with a notation that the remaining 8 names on Thomas Calloway's list were to be contacted by the county recorder's office and advised of their rights. A separate matter was referred to the territorial marshal regarding the forged warrant and Howell's role in it. Howell would have a long fall. Stroud walked out of that hotel dining room as a man who had entered it owning most of the eastern portion of Garnet County. He walked out as a man who owned what he could prove he had come by honestly, which turned out to be considerably less. He did not speak to Nora on his way out. He did not look at Ida. He looked at Cole once at the back of the room, the long look of a man cataloging a loss. Cole met it and did not look away. Prout left before his boss did. The 2 hired men who had come with him left before Prout did. That was how a structure came apart, from the outside in. The parts that had only ever been held together by the confidence of the man at the center leaving first when the confidence was gone. Outside, in the evening, Ida sat on the hotel steps with Caleb beside her and her cane across her knees, and she looked out at the street of Garnet with the expression of a woman who has looked out at a great many things from a great many steps and knows how to sit with the particular quality of an ending. Nora stood in the doorway. Cole stood nearby, close enough, not too close. $412, Nora said. $412, Ida said. Thomas would have, Nora started and then stopped. Thomas would have been here, Ida said. He's not, we are. She looked up at Nora. That is enough. More than enough. Caleb beside Ida said, "Can we go home now?" Nora looked at him and her face did the thing a mother's face does when a question is simpler than the answer. "We're going to figure out where home is," she said. "But yes, we're going." Cole walked over and crouched in front of Caleb, eye to eye, the way he'd done in the creek bed, except now there was nothing between them that needed managing. "Son," he said, "you did a man's job this week." Caleb looked at him. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I sat in a back room." "You stayed where you were told," Cole said. "You didn't panic. You let the people around you do what they needed to do without making it harder." He paused. "You know how many grown men can't do that?" Caleb considered this with the serious attention of a boy who takes compliments as seriously as criticisms because he has learned that both are information. Not many, he said. Many, Cole said. He stood up. He looked at Nora, who was looking at him with the door fully open now, not just the half-inch. Calloway, he said. Mr. Darden, she said. I have a north fence line that needs mending, he said. And I have more work than one pair of hands can manage and not enough sense to hire properly. He paused. I am not Stroud. I pay what I say I'll pay, and I write it in a book anyone in my employ can look at any day they choose. I am saying that plainly because it needs saying plainly. She looked at him for a long moment. And the cabin on the rise. She said because she had heard what Ida had told her about the Darden place, the foreman's cabin that had been empty since the man who'd lived in it moved on to something else 3 years ago. Comes with the job, he said. It's yours as long as you want it. When you don't want it, you leave with what's yours and a handshake at the gate. Ida keeps books better than any person I've ever known, Cole said. I'd be a fool not to want her keeping mine. Ida from the steps said, I want fair wages and the use of the kitchen on Sunday afternoons. You'll have both, Cole said, without looking away from Nora. Nora was quiet for a moment. The street of Garnet was going amber in the evening light, and a horse cart was moving slow past the hotel, and somewhere down the block a door opened and closed and let out a brief burst of voices and then silence again. Mr. Darden, she said. Yes, ma'am. You stopped in a creek bed for a woman you didn't know and a boy you'd never seen. She paused. A man does that once and it might be circumstance. A man does what you have done this week, that's character. She looked at him. Thomas used to say you can't see a man's character in the easy moments. You see it in the creek bed moments. Cole held her look. He was right. Usually was. She took a breath that settled something in her chest. All right, Mr. Darden, we'll come see the cabin. They came to see the cabin the following week. It was small and solid, cedar and stone, with a stove that drew well and a window facing east that caught the morning light and a porch where a person could sit in the evening and see the whole of the north pasture laid out like something that had been put there specifically to look at. Caleb ran the perimeter of it in about 45 seconds flat and came back with the expression of a boy who has filed a claim. Ida walked through the 2 rooms with her cane and her level eyes and came out and said, The roof needs work. We'll do it, Cole said. Ida said, noticing the word. If that's acceptable, Cole said. It's acceptable, Ida said, and went to sit on the porch and look at the north pasture, which she did with the expression of a woman who has outlasted a great many things and found the view from the other side worthwhile. Nora stood at the cabin door and looked out at the land. The light was good this time of day, long and golden, the kind that made everything it touched look like it had been there a long time and intended to stay. Cole stood beside her, close enough to speak easily, not so close as to presume. Your husband was right, she said. About the creek bed moments. Mrs. Calloway, Cole said. Nora, she said. He looked at her. You have called me Mrs. Calloway for a week, she said. My name is Nora. Nora, he said. She looked out at the pasture. A person can stay somewhere for the wrong reasons, she said. Because she's trapped or frightened or has nowhere else to go. I have done that. I know what it feels like. She paused. I will not do it again, he said. If I stay because I decide to stay. That's the only way I'd want it, he said. She nodded once, the particular nod of a woman who has been told a thing she needed confirmed and has confirmed it. Down the slope, Caleb was attempting to scale the fence post, and not succeeding and trying again with the patient confidence of a boy who believes that trying is the point. Cole Darden, who had spent a week being the man he wanted to be rather than the man it was easier to be, stood on a porch in the afternoon light, and thought that the arithmetic of the situation had turned out to be more manageable than he'd feared and more worthwhile than he'd let himself hope. In the county seat. Stroud's ledger was in the territorial marshal's custody. In the hotel where Beecham had held court, the record of the judgment was copied and filed and sent to Millhaven. In the pocket of Nora Calloway's dress, against her chest, in the place where she kept what mattered, was a receipt for $412. And in a cabin on a rise above the Darden North pasture, Ida Calloway sat on a porch with a new ledger open in her lap and wrote the first lines of a new account in her precise and level hand, and the numbers in it moved in only one direction. the right one. This has been a Redwood Chronicles original story. If Nora Calloway's fight meant something to you, if you believe that a woman who holds for 5 days against a man with a county in his pocket deserves to see her child go free and her name cleared, subscribe to this channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment below. Tell me which character stayed with you longest. We tell stories like this one every week on Redwood Chronicles, stories of women who hold the line when everything tells them to let go. Don't miss the next one. We'll see you there.